Laura, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. Your show is so insightful, and I'm honored to be here.
Thank you for saying so. I want to start where we kind of always start in these conversations is when was the first time you encountered Stephen Sondheim, when you knew who that was?
I think very, very late, actually. I have probably come across his name because I loved, growing up, West Side Story. And so I probably saw his name on the CD, but I didn't really pay much attention. I didn't try to see what else did this guy do. And growing up in France, I was a teenager at the end of the 90s, basically. There was no Sondheim whatsoever in France. It's like the guy didn't exist. The only contact I may have had was through some of the movies that were released, but it was very small in France at the time. We're talking about Forum, or Little Night Music, or Stravinsky, actually, that he did the score of. But it's only specialists, I would say, would know that. So I had no idea. Mm-hmm. It's only after I came to the U.S. and after I did film scoring for quite some time that I started to go back into acting and going into community theater. I mean, it was impossible to not know anymore who Sondheim was, because deservedly so, every community theater does Sondheim very regularly. So I started to really discover his music at the time. But it's several years ago, really.
Yeah. Just as a quick diversion, I'm curious about what the musical theater landscape is in France. There's Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and Les Mis was developed there before it was translated into English. Is it a more robust system than I have in my mind?
No, not really. It's changed since I left. Maybe they were waiting for me to leave to do it. So I've been in the US 20 years now. And until the point when I left, it was very, very small. Like you mentioned Cherbourg. And so there was a little bit of the Michel Legrand. But mostly they were pushed by the movies. People knew, like I said, West Side Story because of the movie. It was a huge success. Or every time there was a movie version, I guess the things like Fiddler on the Roof or where made it big. You mentioned Les Mis. It's interesting because I had never heard of Les Mis before I moved to the U.S. Okay. So that's how it's really got big on the West End and before it got famous in France. There was a couple of, it really started at the end of the 90s. There was a couple of big ones. There's Notre Dame de Paris, which actually, interestingly, was written by Canadian, Quebec. Maybe that's the reason why, he had the culture that came with it. And then it started really blooming after that. There was 2000s, I think there was Romeo and Juliet and a couple like Mozart, the rock opera, but it was really the beginning, and it really exploded since then, since say 2010. And Sondheim wasn't produced in France at all. It wasn't premiere before. I looked it up before 2010. It was the first. They started with a Little Night Music, and then they did Sweeney, and then some of them are still not haven't been premiered yet, but I think it's coming soon. But
maybe just have a different picture of France in my head, but I feel like Forum would be like a layup, like the perfect thing to produce there. But it might be a little bit too much patter that you have to translate.
Yeah, I'm not sure because it's
farce and stuff like that. That there is a French farce tradition.
Yeah, I mean I think it's hilarious. But yeah, interesting. I think they also haven't done Anyone Can Whistle, which I think in many ways, I mean, although there are French actors in there, but I think it's or fake French actors.
Yeah.
But I think it would be also something successful and interesting. His first among his first works, but soon let's see how if your prediction comes.
Yeah, right. This is a good segue because you mentioned Anyone Can Whistle, and you have a new album, Anyone Can Whistle, a Sondheim Journey, which, if I actually get all my ducks in a row, will be available the day that this episode goes live. So that's March 22nd, the birthday of Stephen Sondheim. Take me through that. What was the genesis of wanting to create a jazz album, essentially, of Sondheim songs?
It's sort of a long story that brought me to that. I grew up with classical music. I went to conservatory from the age of 6 or something. And looking back, but I only realized that recently, is that the music I used to listen to was, I would say, programmatic music, as opposed to absolute music. So really music with a sort of a storytelling backbone. But in conservatory, it was very academic. So what we listened to was really started at Baroque and would stop around 1930 when tonality starts to good, at least at the time. Hopefully it's changed now. What I would listen to was mostly non-sung, because I didn't really like opera. It sounded weird. I was a little scared when I was little listening to those big voices.
Sorry to interrupt, but just to take a little side tangent, what type of, or I guess which composers were the ones that were the biggest inspirations?
A big love story. I have a big love story with Gustav Mahler, actually.
Mahler,
it started
okay.
when I was around 10. I discovered first, his symphonies, really. I came to his sung work much, much, much later in my adulthood. But in my teenage years, I was like fascinated by Mahler. And I think it's all about his storytelling, and he's like, he takes moments from folk and he throws it, and then he changes and surprises you and go into this big epic moment, and then he laughs at himself, and something that I really like about that. And at the same time, jazz came in my life a little bit. I discovered jazz first through a local festival. For some reason, with my family, we would go every year to this jazz festival as a family trip.
Which jazz festival?
Nice Jazz Festival.
One, okay.
So I had a polite relationship with jazz at the time. Right away I liked the harmonies. Something that spoke to me is like those, what they call extended chords with like a 9th, 11th, 13th chord that are just not 3 notes, but 5, 6 notes. But I got a little bored in that, in the, what can be perceived as self-indulgence of jazz, with like, where they just go on and I get a little lost in the improvisations. I didn't listen to rock at all, or pop, or hip hop, or country. I mean, there's no such thing as country in France anyway. I don't think so. But for some reason,
I do want to see a French cowboy now.
I don't. But yeah. And then at the same time, during weekends, my other passion besides music has always been film. And during weekends with friends in high school, we would take a camera and we would go. That was before Instagram and even before YouTube. So we would make sketches. We were big fans of the Monty Python, and we would, we would try to do the same thing, like writing very terrible sketches that are lost forever. It's good for humanity. And we would act in them, and so I had those two things going on. And after high school, I tried to get into film. I was a PA and stuff, but it was very difficult, obviously, to make a living with that. And I thought, okay, I'm going to try to bring those two passions together and do film music. And so that brought me to a music school in Boston, Berklee College of Music, where they had a film scoring program. And Berklee College of Music is a temple of jazz. So there I got a second very deep immersion in that. From there, I really got into jazz for performance and playing with friends, and the academic portion of it was film scoring. Right after graduation, I moved to LA, and I worked in the film industry and TV and video games for 10 years. But little by little, something happened, is that doing ghostwriting and orchestrating, and unless you're a very famous film composer, which I'm not, most of what I do was very derivative and a little not very, I didn't feel very good writing all this. I think little by little, without me really understanding it, I started to feel depressed, really, and I got into depression, and I got like the fear of the blank page, like the writer's block, and a creative burnout. And what really saved me is going back to acting. I started to go to acting classes and then local theaters, and then I started to discover how cathartic acting was. I mean, it's a truism, but it's true, like all truisms. At some point, I think it's 3 years ago, there was what really started this project. That's a very long introduction. But I was in a Sondheim tribute show, a Sondheim review, UE kind of show. And so that was not only I was an actor for some of the numbers, but I was also a accompanist and so musical director of sorts. And I started to get all those vocal scores of Sondheim from his shows. And I discovered a lot of his music, not through the recording, but by playing them and singing them at the same time. And something about those chords and that music felt like we should do a jazz version of some of the songs. And the original idea is that after that review show, there would be a second part. And so I talked to the director of the community theater. I said, like, why don't we do a second part with like guest singers, each coming like a cabaret version with jazz. And he said, yeah, great. So I started writing 15 or so songs as a demo for the singers. And as often the way things happen, the show never got produced.
Right.
And a couple of months later, I went back to those demos, and I was impressed by how easily they flowed out of me, which was the first time in many years that I had fun writing music. And one of the things I think acting brought into my life was the power of vulnerability. And I said, like, I'm going to take a big vulnerable step, and I'm going to make this album mine. I'm going to sing on it, which it was my first solo album as a singer. I'm going to arrange this for jazz, but let's go the whole way. Let's do big band and strings, which I never wrote for big band before. And I produced it the best I could. I hired many musicians, and here we are with it.
How many musicians in total would you say play on this album?
So the big band is 18 musicians, and then there is like basically one guest artist per track. So that's a total of almost 30, I think.
So you're orchestrating this yourself as well?
Yes, I arranged everything except one track, and maybe we will have a chance to talk about it if we go track by track, but except Move On, that I didn't.
Okay. Well, I wanted to just know what the process is like going through a Sondheim song and trying to transpose this into a different style. Like, what are you looking for? What are you changing?
I was very scared, to be honest, because he's such an icon, and it's always difficult to approach this and say, like, am I going to betray his work? Is it a heresy to, transform this so drastically? I even went online and tried to find what sort of authorization they needed from Sondheim estate, because it's like,
right,
if you transform significantly a work, you need the authorization. So I wrote to them, and they told me, like, you don't need anything, for jazz. It's if you respect the melody and the lyrics and stuff. So, but I think the question at the start was like, how often has Sondheim been translated to jazz? And obviously sometimes. But I wouldn't also think very often, not if you compare to, Cole Porter or
right,
Rodgers and Hammerstein. And I mean, we can, I think there's a good discussion to have as why and how would you explain that? The idea for me was to try to translate something. Okay, let me start by saying this. I think Sondheim songs are, to take an analogy with linguistics, I think it is a high context songs, which if you take them out of context, they lose a lot of the meaning. I don't think if you take My Favorite Things, and if you know that it's a nanny singing to a bunch of kids, it doesn't change the song at all drastically. But if you take Pretty Women, that's on my album, and if you take it out of the context of the the razor, the barber's chair and stuff, it's becomes something almost. So it's almost a song about somebody singing about pretty women. It almost sounds uninteresting, almost cringy, almost,
Right, yeah.
So what I try to experiment is like, how do we get those songs out of their context and yet retain some of the ambiguity that brings the power of music and art, I think, and of Sondheim, definitely, where he was a master at that. So I think throwing it into jazz and curating the order of the tracks, I think, it was part of creating an arc, and that's why I called it a journey, a Sondheim journey.
Part of the fascinating thing for me is what you decide to include on this album. Just to call it out, there's not one, but two selections from Roadshow, which is the next series we're going to be getting into very shortly, I swear, everyone who's listening. So I want to know how you decided to pick the songs that you did, because I think that there's a couple that I was like, oh yeah, obviously you're going to pick that one. But I would say that more than half are like, oh, that's a really interesting pick.
Okay, good. First of all, I went through all these songs, and I selected at first, between 15 and 20, and I started arranging them. And then some of them really spoke to me right away, and sometimes because of the music, sometimes because of the lyrics, of having, loved many people in my life, like we all do. And I had sometimes specific people in my mind. And then I tried to arrange those songs order in a way that seemed to create some sort of logic. And I felt some of them were question and answers, or were informing each other. Like the obvious example is Wait and Pretty Women. I think even Sondheim talks about that in Finishing the Hat, how Pretty Women only make sense after Wait.
Right.
And so that's where they appeared there. And I felt, especially on those roadshow, I felt one was sort of answering the other to me. Mm-hmm. And that's why they're there, and they're clearly in two different sections. I think it's there's a midpoint at track 6 to me that sort of switches the whole album inside out.
Yeah, to go through it here, we probably don't have time to go deep dive into every single track, but let's talk about the two halves. So we start off with Wait, we then go into Isn't He Something from Roadshow, then Pretty Women, Losing My Mind, Not a Day Goes By, and then Anyone Can Whistle, the name of the album itself.
Anyone can whistle, that's what they say, easy. Anyone can whistle, any old day, easy. It's all so simple, relax, let go, let fly. So someone tell me why can't I can dance a tango, I can read Greek easy, I can slay a dragon any old week.
How do we get to that shape?
Right. To me, the first half is really about darkness. I hope this journey is sort of darkness into light or into maturity. We can talk about the last song at the end because it's very special. But it started with manipulation with Wait, which is a lullaby sort of. I make it start with almost a bossa nova on the feel, where you have to wait for almost a minute to hear the voice starting. So I'm a little bit playing and fooling around with the audience. And then we go into, to me, Isn't He Something? Although it sounds happy and engaging, I think it's a very interesting song about our society, about American society today, and the admiration and the fascination we have for effortless success. And I can think of a couple of politicians or entrepreneurs that have that kind of contagious effect, and without having, and we don't think about the trail of destruction they leave behind. So, and I like how I'm trying every song to have something fun, because in the end, I believe in the power of entertainment. I want people to listen to that and just have fun, but then have another layer where you can think about it and see, why did I have so much fun when you make the audience complicit in a way. And so I like that idea of like the falling under the spell of charisma of the song. Then we go to Pretty Women, which is about distraction, I would say. I also use bossa nova as an echo to the first track, as if Sweeney, learned the lesson of Wait, so to speak. Losing My Mind is going into obsession. Obviously, it's I think it's incredible song about obsession. So the darkness goes until not today goes by. I chose the first version. I mean the version when chronologically the second one, or the first one that appears in the show. So the one linked to the divorce, basically. And I think anyone can whistle. You will hear the big band starts the song and then drops out completely, and then only piano and voice take over. Sort of a naked, vulnerable moment, and the big band just closes the song with a little button, like brackets, like parentheses of.
Yeah.
And I think it's a moment where I feel to me, it's a most vulnerable moment, and I feel it's the moment where I start to gain some transformation, some lightness, and then we go into the second part, which is less self-obsessed. And more mature.
Yeah, so that second half includes No One Is Alone, Poems, The Best Thing That Ever Has Happened, Move On, and then Loving You is how the album ends. I love the fact you include Poems. I think that's such a beautiful piece of music inside the show of Pacific Overtures, and the way that you interpret it works really, really well.
Oh, thank you.
Tracing shadows of the pines on my lady sleeping. Yacht. Dawn brightening as she opens up her eyes, but it's all gone away. Your time, you go. Leaves never like leaves, changing green to pink to gold, and it changes everything. Sun, it's here like the sun, center of our pools, adding ripples to the shore, to my jealous end. Your turn. Rain, haze, wind.
It was interesting because I playing it, I didn't listen to the song first, and I played this on piano. It sounded right away. It's like, wait, what is, what instrument it is? And I think there was no mention of the instrument on the vocal score, and I thought like, oh, maybe that could be some almost funky pattern instead of being this traditional Japanese. It's also the original song is a dialogue between those two characters that represent almost two very different aspects of the development of Japan. And I sing both of them, which was also something that I thought maybe I shouldn't do it, but I thought that would be like the inner dialogue that it can be transposable to more things, like the inner debating of internal conflict, modernity of tradition, and that applies to, of course, Japan very much in that section, but it can be about anything, about the advent of AI. It can be about China nowadays, or progress or preservation. And I thought to go full circle, taking funk, which is also already a fusion genre. I wanted to push the idea of fusion even further, and I brought shakuhachi in there that's played in a funky part to try to go full circle with like a Japanese instrument that's used in a completely modern or retold way.
You mentioned already how Move On was the one that you didn't adapt, I guess, yourself. So who did you bring in to help out?
It's a friend's friend, Kyle Newmaster. It's interesting because paradoxically, at that point of the show, George has, or the new George has an artist block, right? And it's exactly what I had. And like when I thought about this song, I said, there's no way I can arrange this song. It's too important, too great, too significant for. Yeah, I thought this song is too important so I don't feel I can arrange it. And I had this. This song talks about creation, doubt, and exactly what I had. So I struggled with it for a long time. I said, I should try harder. And then I felt I was trying too hard. And so I started asking for help. A couple of people, and they were too busy or also maybe intimidated. And I found this friends who's like, yeah, I'll help you. We'll. And he wrote it very quickly, which I think is great because it's exactly what it is about. It's like, not thinking about it. And I think it's a great arrangement, that a big mixture. He kept some of the original structure where you go from this flowing moments and those more retrospective piano and voice islands sort of that are in each song. So that's the reason why I really asked for help, and that's the only track that I felt blocked, and I thought it was very ironic and interesting. Also, it meant something by itself, that I wouldn't be able to tackle that song, and I would need some help, sort of a dot of sort who just he's my dot in a way.
Well, then let's end off with the last song, "Loving You," obviously from Passion. Something that I mentioned in that season is, when I did the deep dive, I really fell in love with Passion more than I already did. Like, it was a show I already liked. But man, when you really start to pick that apart, you really see how beautiful that music comes together. And Loving You is so earnest in its language. So how did you go about choosing that as the last song?
It's the song that gave me the hardest time to sing, because I felt so naked. And of course, I listened to the Donna Murphy version, and I'm like, oh my God, there's no way I can do something as honest. I heard strings, and I wanted to connect it with. It's the only song in the album that doesn't have a big band with strings instead, along with Losing My Mind, and I think they were connected. I wanted to connect them through instrumentation as well, because they're both about obsession, but they're linked differently. They respond differently to that obsession, like as Fosca is a total surrender. So I wanted sort of echo, a bridge between the two songs. And I have strings because I felt I needed that added a little bit of the torch song, I guess, feel. And also I have incredible musician. I have Peter Erskine on drums there, who's a legendary drummer, Michael Valerio on bass. They give a sort of a nice motion, and again, this surrender to me was very difficult, very exposed, but it's so important that I wanted to finish with that song, although you can question whether it's really dark, light or dark. I mean, her love is in many ways unhealthy and manipulative also, I guess. She's jealous, and she pursues a guy on top of a mountain or onto the train, so there's this thing that's very unhealthy about it. But I like the silence that comes after the end of the song, if that makes sense. And I thought that had to be the way I end the album.
For people who are interested, listening, picking this up, what are the ways that they can get it?
I mean, listening to it, it's going to be released on all platforms. I think it's like any Sondheim song. I was intimidated the first time I did a Sondheim show, because as an actor, because I felt, oh my God, there's so much. It's so much to unpack. There's so much. It's so intellectual. It's so smart. It's so multi-layered. And then in the end, it's just like for Fosca, it's like surrender to it. It's just like, and trust, I guess, like with any actor's work, trust the process, trust that it's, the intellectual work, the deep work is already made. So just listen to it and try to enjoy it. And I hope that I made arrangements that are fun to listen to, and that also like in a way that makes it more approachable. And that way, the writing, the music will speak to you and will reach you on all those levels that Sondheim was so good at. So all the big streaming platforms, whatever you are on, you'll find it starting March 22nd.
It is definitely worth it. So Laurent, thank you so much for joining me here today.
Thank you for having me.
I will live and I would die for you. I will live and I would die for you. I will live and I would die for